So hi, Andrew. Career in three parts. Started off in recruitment. I was part of building a company called LaFosse from about 10 people to nearly 300 as one of the leadership team members there. I then switched careers and moved into VC. So I founded a venture capital fund, raised about $100 million with two others, invested in about 15 seed and Series A stage businesses over 3 years. Decided I wanted to get back into operating, and then I've been the director of operations, which includes people, talent, as well as our customer service functions, our claims functions, all our internal operations. For Napo, joined it when it was 10 people, seed stage or pre-seed, went through their Series A last September, and now we're about just around 100 people, about 70, 80,000 customers, grown from about 6,000 customers. So that's me.
Hello, my name is Jessica Zwaan. I am Chief Operating Officer at a company called Whereby. We are a fully distributed company headquartered in Norway. We have 3 entities in the UK, Norway, and the USA, which is where I live. I am similarly responsible for everything from customer, people, talent, legal, customer success, customer support, and a few other bits and pieces as well. I'm also the author of a book called Built for People, which is about how to use product management principles and apply them to your people and operations teams. That's me.
Hello, I'm Glyn. I am a talent lead for Multiverse. We are a 850-person Series D edtech startup. We were founded 2016, and we have a social mission creating an alternative to university and corporate training. I've been with the business 5 years, employee 40, and the first person in any people or talent function. Prior to that, spent 6 years at the start of my career in media and technology recruitment agency side, and 2 years running my own RPO-style consultancy business.
Thank you, and hi all. My name's Glenn. My recruitment career started in 2007. I've done a mixture of agency side and internal roles. Current role is head of recruitment at Volta Trucks. We are an electric vehicle startup, and we've grown from, I've been with them for 2 years. We've grown from 14 people in 2021 to 900 plus as of today, mostly in the UK, but across Europe as well.
Okay, so amazing panel. Whilst they're introducing themselves, you may have seen that we've got a QR code here. So this panel is going to be 10 minutes of a couple of questions that we've lined up, and then it's going to go over to you and you'll get the chance to ask the questions that you want to. So please make sure you scan the QR code, write the questions. Heads up, I am dyslexic, so no big words. Let's play nice small words for me. I will then manage the questions and we'll read those out. Pro tip, if you want a question to be asked and you don't want to run out of time, do a little upvote. The more upvotes it gets, the more likely I'm going to ask it. Does that make sense? Can I have a thumbs up? Yeah, amazing. Okay, I'm going to try and keep you out of that food coma. Glyn, I'm going to pick on you first. What is the biggest challenge you're facing right now?
I think as a business, and probably lots of people share this, as a kind of in the VC space, there's the big push at the moment for moving from growth at all costs into kind of path to profitability and sustainable growth models. We're definitely part of that. I think combined with that, something that's individual to us, or actually I think Glenn, we probably share this a little bit, is the stage of growth we are. We've got to Series D, we've hit that kind of critical mass, that 850 people. For context, when I joined for the first 4 years, we doubled headcount number year on year, so 40 to 80 to 160 to 320 to 650-ish. And now that's obviously a change that we're making on a business level, combined with the macroeconomic factors that mean that kind of VC firms are pushing for that path to profitability. What that means for us as a talent function is that actually our work probably starts earlier in the journey, whereas before we just couldn't fill roles quick enough. You know, the next one was coming onto our plate before the last one was finalized. Now, actually, we're looking at headcount more closely. We're thinking, does this need to be a hire? Can we create efficiencies in the business? Are we working in silos where, in fact, actually this skill set already exists and we just need to put 2 teams together? Feels a little bit like the anti-recruitment, but actually my job now increasingly starts 6 months before. It's thinking a lot more about succession planning, headcount planning, working with VPs or C-suite on what's the journey of their team over the next 12 to 18 months, which is a really exciting change. Definitely different to the 4 years prior, where, as I said, it was just how quickly can we get people through the door.
Amazing. Does anybody else on this panel resonate with that? Similar challenges, different challenges?
Yeah, I think so. Glyn and I were speaking beforehand, in fact, about the very similar sort of trajectory that both companies have been on. I think our story, we were hiring 2 years ago. The people joining us 2 years ago had a very different reason for joining us than the people joining us today. And when you've been focused on speed for the last 2 years, it's how do you stop and think about that? How do you start maturing your EVP, your offering? How do you start educating the business on the types of profiles that we will be looking at now are slightly different. So speed brings us challenges, and then slowing down gives you a chance to catch up. But I think we both probably feel like it needs to be done quicker.
Anything else from our panel? Anything to add to that? Any other challenges that we've got going on right now?
Internally or external, as in
Let's stick to that attraction piece. So
attraction.
yeah, let's stick with that. Or if you've got anything else, I think it'd be good to share.
The major things, and we'll laugh at the post-COVID question that we talked about earlier. I think that one of the biggest things is you used to have this set play. You were either fully remote or you were fully in the office. And so your competition was either that or the other, and you had your principles, and it was very, very easy to sell one or the other because you're selling against the same thing. Now you're selling against fucking everything. Like I half a day in the office, 2 days a month, like there's no like standard way of selling against it. So you've got to be super principled. And then if you've got your managers, you'll know this internally, right? Where you've got managers who are like, yeah, this 2 days in the office per week's great. Other people want 5. Other people want 1. And when push comes to shove, and they're interviewing people and they're selling the role, and someone says, oh, could I do 1? Now, if they're that side of the fence, they're more likely to lean towards saying yes, and it just drives you crazy. So for me, one of the biggest challenges I have is just making sure the managers are absolutely aligned. We're 2 days, we're hybrid, 2 days in the office per week. We've got a fixed principle around it. We may change it in the future, but absolutely that is what we have. And if I hear managers going, oh, or I hear about it, or I see in the interview notes, I go absolutely mental. So my one challenge that I have at the moment is like you're just selling something completely different than you were 2-3 years ago, and making sure your managers are totally aligned to what you're selling and don't lean towards their preference is just really critical. Otherwise, you're just in this loop of what does this person want at final stage, and it's a nightmare. So that's probably the thing that I find most annoying.
I love that. Jessica, you obviously have a different role. Do you have like different challenges with that? Is there anything that you can really resonate with, or is it a completely different kind of sphere you're looking at right now?
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking, like, I'm actually in a really lucky position right now. We don't really have any
go away
challenges.
Go away.
From the talent acquisition perspective right now, I think actually, if anything, it's Whereby has such a lovely employer brand. We are a fully remote business, so we don't have this challenge of people wanting one thing and getting another. And we've been, I think, very, very disciplined at creating a very specific voice out in the market. We have a very open compensation framework, so people that want to come and work for us kind of have all of the info on hand before they start. They know what they're going to get paid. They know how many days they're going to be working remotely all the time. And we're very, very open. So actually, if anything, we have like probably more people inbound than we have roles open. Maybe it's like reviewing CVs because we get too many. That's a horrible answer when people are struggling with other things. That said, I do a lot of consulting to startups and scale-ups, and the challenges out there from those teams are radically different, I think. I think it's this idea of trying to understand, like, how do you present yourself as a business in a marketplace that is very, very noisy with this, do you remember in 2016 when like employer branding was like bean bags and snack walls and all of that? And if you just did a bean bag and a snack wall, everyone was like, we want to come work for you. And then that kind of got out of favor in like 2018, 2019. Now it feels like the new thing is like, how do we stand out? I know, we'll just talk about how flexible we are, but it doesn't mean anything. And I think a lot of like companies I'm in consulting are trying to figure out like, what are they actually trying to say when they're talking about flexibility or they're just generally their employer brand. I think so that's something I've been seeing a lot.
I've got question for you around fully remote, because one of the things we will go somewhat remote in the future. I don't know when it will be, but it'll be somewhere, and it'll probably be when we go international expansion, because it makes a little bit more sense. Like, my question to you is around like where roles sit and why they sit where they sit, and globally, right? You've got teams in Europe, US, UK, right? And you've got, I don't know where your product team sits and where you hire globally for your product team, or whether you hire just in one location for your product team. Like, do you have any challenges around where the person sits and why they sit in that area in regards to?
So Whereby's mission is to see a world where anywhere works, right? We have embedded video APIs into different software. Multiverse is actually one of the customers we're trying to speak to at the moment. We love you guys. When that is your mission, I think we've kind of taken the strategic perspective of like, who do we want to be in the marketplace then, if we know that our entire point of existing is to enable complete distribution, right? So in doing that, we've said, okay, well, in that case, we believe everyone can work from anywhere. So we will hire any role anywhere. So we are completely globally distributed. We have absolutely no preferences or favorite countries or locations. And the team then operates hours agnostically. So you can work whatever hours you want to work, completely at your own discretion, as long as your output is good. And we have a very, very rigid performance assessment process, which means that everyone works all over the place and our hours cross over willy-nilly, which means sometimes you do a meeting at 7 a.m, but most of the time you do whatever you want all the time, which can be really chaotic and intensely stressful. So actually in our interview process, one of the things we bake into we do a paid practical for every single person that comes through our interview process. All of the interview practicals have a lot of ambiguity baked into them by default. So the person has to kind of figure out what to do as much as they are producing something. And that is purposeful to try and test whether somebody can basically work pretty much by themselves, hours-wise, most of the time.
Huge cultural challenges there. Like, you've got people working anywhere for different teams. You've got 5 or 6 different nationalities and cultures in one team. It's a longer conversation, actually, isn't it? But
yeah, I mean, my team alone, I have somebody in Wyoming, someone in India. I've got people working across pretty much all of Europe. It's just a huge spread.
Glyn, I'm going to interrupt you. The one person I feel comfortable picking on. We're actually going to go into our Slido questions now, so I'm so sorry on that. I just don't want my audience to miss out on their valuable time. So everyone's busy. Somebody definitely put a joke up there, and it was A grade. Not sure who that was. So look, the first question that we're going to cover, panel. It's all right, I can read them to you. It's cool. So what the audience most wants to know is, in terms of when you were at a phase where the brand wasn't as well known as it necessarily is now, what were you doing in order to attract people to your business, against those bigger brands who perhaps have a sexier brand or better benefits? What were you doing to bring people in?
I'll go just because I think I'm at the earliest stage of business. So I've probably seen this the most in the last 12 months. I think there's like 2 or 3 things that you have in your absolute favor when you're a small business, when you're a much smaller business, when you're a bigger business. One is that by definition, your mission is differentiated. So the thing that we played on a lot was just our mission of the business. We wouldn't do anything else apart from absolutely hammer our mission wherever we could. LinkedIn or career sites or Glassdoor, wherever people hung out, we hammered our mission, because our mission is the thing that differentiates us against anybody else anyway. The second is then the way we hired. So we know as a small business that I'm not sure how long it takes you go from like interview to offer, but a year ago when we were building this and I was 30 people, I do that regularly in a day, especially for customer service, especially for those sorts of roles. And that speed, you can't, like, there's not, big companies just cannot compete on that front. And then you get known for being speed. The recruiters know you for being very quick. They love you for it, for obvious reasons. And suddenly you just got this flywheel effect, because everybody knows your mission. They love your mission. You make it very easy for them to be connected to you in some way, so they can get job updates. And if you move exceptionally quickly, there's no one who doesn't love you in that dynamic, whether it be recruiters, whether it be platforms, whether it be people, or whether it be us. So those were my 2 things that, when I read the question, I thought straight off.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd add to that as well is just being prepared in the early stages where your brand is building to actually reinvent your recruitment processes, practices, and go-to-market strategy almost monthly, certainly quarterly. Like if I think about when we were pre-Series A versus what we do now, it's just unimaginably different. But actually, there's 6 or 7 distinct ways in which we hired between now and then. So I think not getting into a fixed mindset of saying, well, this is how we hire and this will get us from 10 to 100 or 10 to 200, and actually just working out for you when you need to evolve that thinking.
Yeah, for us, it can be quite daunting. I mean, we compete with Mercedes and Renault and Volvo and a number of other sort of really high-profile brands. I think the key thing for me early doors when we were a really small company was really trying to amplify our voice in the marketplace and get the message out there. The marketing department becomes your best friend, and you just leverage the company brand as much as you can. And also getting your employees talking about the business online, on social channels, on LinkedIn, everywhere you can. The more you can leverage your staff, the more impactful that is. And that's been really successful for us and brought really good results.
I think I'm just going to answer that question because it's the same thing.
Which
In
one?
my opinion,
Salaries?
the top one.
Top one? Yeah,
Being
go
so
for it.
transparent. So I think what we did to stand out was I very genuinely believe that your company exists within a marketplace of cultures, right? It's like it's a product that you're selling, and in order for the right customer or like the ideal customer profile to buy into your culture, you need to be very specific and disciplined and purposeful about what it is you're actually selling. I think one of the mistakes I see from early stage companies is just to rip off what other companies are doing because they like what it looks like. And they don't actually have any kind of unique perspective about why their company is different or why you should go and work there. So at Whereby, we made a very distinct decision to be very specific about what kind of company we wanted to build, which purposefully turns some people off. Some people don't like the idea of working hours agnostic. Some people don't like the idea of being completely distributed. But we have been extremely transparent about what kind of company we are. So we made the decision to basically build everything publicly. So almost all of our policies and handbook is completely available to the public, our compensation philosophy, our calculator, everything. The vast majority of decisions we make as a company are visible. You can go and look them up on our Notion page, which is public. And yes, of course, OpenOrg is now, I think, really pushing that conversation forward, and Adam and the team there are doing a great job. But one of the things that's been very good for us is it's actually helped us really stand out to people. People want to work at Whereby before they even get a chance to have an interview with us. And they already know why they want to work with Whereby. So there's no real selling that needs to happen in the interview process. It's just kind of validating that their perception is reality and that they're going to be the appropriate person that can do this job, right? And it also means that we have a lot of great people we've had to come through the interview process that we've had to say, like, you're not going to work out, not because you're not super talented, but because you won't be able to cope with the ambiguity, or I think you have this very idealistic understanding of what remote work's going to look like. And then I think the one final thing that's actually been very helpful for us is the level of transparency we have and the level of honesty and trust that we give to people and we expect back from the way that we have our relationship with our team means that we've actually been able to sell people in on lower salaries than we have seen at competitors. So for example, we had somebody have an offer at AWS for more money than we could offer them. And we have a very transparent salary framework. And the person ended up taking the offer with us because they knew what they were going to receive and they knew every single year how that salary was going to progress because it's all transparent and public. And for them, actually, the fair distribution of the salary, the way we structure it, was actually such a massive selling point that they preferred to come to us for slightly less salary in the short term, but ultimately the potential of having clarity about where their career was going to go.
Also, so sticking on that salary thread, and I think we've alluded to it slightly, is there anything else you as a panel would do to try and help compete with other businesses that may have bigger salaries than you? Anything else that we could add to that part of this conversation?
I will say one thing that I hate personally. I think a lot of businesses, and particularly kind of earlier stage businesses, do these very strange thing where they make these benefits like, we give you £40 for a farmer's market. It's like, just give people that in cash, please. Like, that would be the one thing that I think is actually doesn't work. I think you're better off trying to like pay fairly competitively. Don't kid yourself. Actually get a proper salary database and look at the actual data. Don't just go on Glassdoor or LinkedIn and like guess what salaries you're paying. I think it really frustrates people when they find out that the way that you've decided what their salary is going to be is going on Googling data engineer salaries in London and then picking that number. Like, I think actually go and be market backed on it. And then when you do that, explain this is where I got the salary information and this is why we've aimed for this percentile. Try and be as transparent as possible. And I actually think most people are pretty, actually, they prefer the transparency around how you're distributing that compensation rather than being told that you Googled it or something else.
Okay. Oh, go on, Glenn.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think the guys nailed it between them. Differentiators that Andrew said and Jess's point about the benchmarking data. Know where you are is key, I think, as well. But salary is not always or very often not the number one reason why someone would join. So you really have to leverage your differentiators, your culture, what you're doing differently to these people who are paying more, whether it is flexibility or in our case, sustainability or just the values of the business, the flexibility side of things. You have to leverage something else and really hammer that home.
So the fun thing about Slido is we're talking about one subject and then we're going to take a really sharp right and talk about something completely different just to keep the panelists on their toes. So next question is, a lot of TA teams have had to reduce their size due to recent market performance. And it seems to be a lot of advice going out there is to look at RPOs, embedded talent and other outsourced kind of providers. What are your thoughts on this? Do you agree with it? Have you used it? Pros and cons? I think this is quite a big conversation, this one. Don't make me pick on someone.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. We have used an RPO or two RPOs over the past 2 years, in fact. One was for a spike in demand, where we had a new CCO join. Right, I want to hire 60 people in 10 countries across in 60 days. We just didn't have the capacity. We couldn't hire an internal team to scale up to do that. The other one was an engineering RPO that had been a pre-existing relationship with our chief engineering officer. And we've just finished bringing all of those RPOs in-house, in fact. I think there definitely is a place for them. They can be very, very useful for quick activity. When they know the business, they can be effective with really specialist areas. But I think my overall preference is people internal in the business who know that business better. But I think there definitely is a place for them.
Just my view, so I have a principle about outsourcing is you don't outsource core, you outsource non-core. So, and that goes whether I'm talking about customer service or engineering or talent. And so when I've used outsourced, I've used it for non-core. So I've used it for kind of research. I've done talent pipelines. I've never actually brought an RPO in to help me with assessment or closing candidates. Absolutely, like that for me is not where the relationship should sit. Absolutely, there's a place when you're scaling, but for me, the principle is never outsource something that's core to your business. You lose. There's too much learning that you lose. There's too much core skill set that you lose by doing that. In my opinion,
I think Chantel might shoot me if I say I haven't had good experiences with an RPO.
I will walk you out this door.
We have used it. I guess I'm somewhere in between the two of you in terms of thoughts. I think. We've used a couple. One of the reasons, and shout out to Chantal's team because they have definitely been the most successful with us at Spinks. The thing for us has always been kind of getting to at least 80% capacity internally and having that buffer to say, well, this 20% is kind of variable. In this market, in the fast growth sector, yes, we might have it this month. It might be pulled next quarter. That's where I think an RPO is really, really valuable. I think then the second thing is making sure that relationship is incredibly tight and that the person working with you for an RPO feels like your team member rather than an agency extension who's got your email address as the benefit, or they can go to brand new. That's a very, very different thing. And I think successful RPO relationships, they feel incredibly embedded or even more embedded than your team in some instances.
Yeah, the closer you can work with them, the better the result. Jessica, what about yourself? Where do you sit in terms of TAs using outsourcers to like flex up, flex down with needs?
I'm a huge advocate for RPOs. I think they're super valuable. I also build my team kind of differently, I think, than quite a lot of businesses do. So I build my team more like a product squad, where the team are very, very strategic in what they're doing. So they spend a lot of their time actually building the internal tools and systems and products. So my team tends to be much more strategic, really focused on like building the infrastructure and like kind of less on the repeatable processes. So I prefer to augment their work with giving them the resource, if they need it, of an RPO to manage that kind of repeatable piece of work. That said, I do agree. So we have a kind of hiring manager driven recruitment process, which means that all of our assessments and everything, all the practical pieces of work and everything else definitely comes through the hiring manager. So when we do have an RPO in place, they're primarily focused on the repeatable parts of the job and kind of top of funnel bits and pieces. I'm not a huge fan of getting an RPO to be like working on your employer brand or anything like that. I just don't really think that they fully understand that piece of work. But I'm a massive fan. I've pretty much always had RPOs in every business I've worked at.
It's nice to have such a spectrum as well for everyone to be able to take away different points of that. Whilst we're talking about our own TA teams, do you think DEI initiatives, activities, responsibilities should sit within TA? If you do, why? If you don't, who should it perhaps sit with and who should be driving it?
I saw this question come up before. It was like the first question that got asked, and I was like, this is a good question. I think when it first came up, my first gut response was just like, no, absolutely not. But I think the answer is kind of more nuanced than that, obviously. But I don't think DEI initiatives should sit in anywhere, right? I think it should be owned by the C-suite ultimately. And I think the C-suite needs to be like actively having those conversations. I just think until you're doing that, you're really just going to be doing a bunch of initiatives that don't actually have any strategic like power, right? And I actually just don't think DEI work is far enough in sophistication right now that you can afford to not have your C-suite constantly having those conversations. So there are pieces of the job that will be kind of given to the TA team. For example, the assessment process and making sure that things are unbiased and fair. But ultimately, is the TA team responsible for making your company diverse? No, I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think talent has to be and will always be arguably the biggest stakeholder of that. And operationally, particularly in a fast growth environment, they're going to be, if you're hiring 100 people this year into a business and doubling in size, that's going to be a huge indicator of the success of your DEI initiatives. I think the risk the other way is you set beautiful, glossy goals for where we'll be in 2025. And if it doesn't attach to talent, you're going to be completely scuppered because it's the single biggest driver of whether those things will be hit. So I would say TA needs a significant seat at the table, should be driven by the C-suite. Ideally, then you have a specific DEI lead in a senior position to be the kind of focal point of.
Yeah, I agree. I think talent are the gatekeepers of D&I, and certainly that's how it works for us. When you're growing very fast and speed is the goal, hiring managers can tend to hire what they know from backgrounds they know, companies they know, networks, their own networks. It's difficult for them to look outside of that. So to get them thinking about multiple success profiles and diverse talent pools, that all has to come from the talent team and the education piece. And I think that's where they have a real critical role in DEI, but completely agree, it needs to be C-suite led.
I kind of on the lines of agree. Is definitely an exec level. So you need an exec level sponsor to do it. I think the one thing I'm thinking of from a talent perspective and where the ownership lands. So one of the principles I have is, maybe I'll use this as an example because it's a bit easier. Like we have a company fit interview, and the hiring manager is not allowed to do that interview. Right? It has to be someone outside of the function who doesn't feel the pressure of that hire. So if you apply that principle to talent, it's like I don't think that the pressure of D&I should go on talent because that's the bias will sit. There's a bias will sit there, and they'll make biased decisions on people coming in, which I fundamentally disagree with in regards to kind of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome kind of discussions. So I've not really thought about it because I don't have to think about it right now. I'm sure I'll have a problem to solve in the future at some point, which I'll then focus on it. But my one principle here is the pressure should never lie on the person making the decisions on who people interview. If the talent person is assigned to making the company more diverse, my God, what's going to happen is they're just going to be super biased on the people that come in, which is totally against the principles of why the hell you're doing it in the first place. Or they're most likely to be. I think it's human nature that they would be. That's my own that kind of thinking. But not a fully formed thought, as I've not had to think about it just yet.
Okay, so we're going to take another sharp left, you'll be pleased to know. Glyn, you mentioned earlier about how a lot of your work is now starting quite a long time before the actual hiring. And I think this question builds on that kind of line of thought quite nicely. So have you successfully built talent pipelines ready for gearing up for that investment or growth plans? Those big conversations are coming, especially recently. Have you had to build pipelines beforehand to showcase that growth? I'm hoping I've done that question justice there.
I think the absolutely honest answer is, have we had to do it? Yes. Have we done it successfully? Probably not. I think that, and I'm not sure how many fast growth organizations will say, yeah, we nailed talent pipelining. I'm not sure how many organizations in general nail pipelining for talent, because when you're chasing your tail for the next hire, that you just end up focused on that. We have spent time, it probably weaves into more the conversation we were having around compensation discussions and kind of planning the future a bit. When you're thinking about investment, is actually, if we invest in this engineering team or product squad or R&D function, what's going to be the cost of that? And then that becomes a talent conversation, which is, what does 5 engineers cost us on the open market at a Series B scale with this level of experience? And then, to be, again, full transparency, probably the level of kind of proper pipelining becomes a LinkedIn profile of, a project of 30, 50 people to go, well, here's our starting point. And that is a long way from perfect, but that's probably in the early stages where we were.
I have a question. Is talent pipeline, is that even a thing? I feel like everyone's been talking about it for so long. I've never, you've just said that you don't think anyone's ever done, you haven't heard of a company doing it successfully, right? Is there a difference between having a talent pipeline and just a good employer brand where people are very responsive to you when you reach out to them? Other than obviously making LinkedIn projects or whatever, having candidates tagged in an ATS or something. But does any company actually have a big warm pipeline of all these people that you just give them a call and they're ready to sign an offer?
Yeah, it's great. Well, I think there's 2 things on that for me. Firstly, the employer brand piece. I heard this quote, and I roll it out to anyone that will listen. The idea of employer brand only being not about the best brands don't advertise to people; they just exist in the world authentically and with personality, and then people seek them out. And I think that might maybe takes us to more of an employer brand angle, but I think that's super important in terms of how that is talent pipelining, is existing authentically as a brand. And then, yeah, I think it goes back, it's like the 90s, it's like the external recruiter Rolodex, right? Their network. When an external agency tells you you've got a network and you go, yeah, I've got LinkedIn too. I've got a LinkedIn recruiter license. That thing did exist, and to an extent it does. And as an ex-agency recruiter, I don't want to disown that fully. But the reality is today, when we have an internal team or people coming externally and we're talking about network or pipelining, we're all fishing from the same pond. And I think they're probably a bit more honest about that.
So I'm kind of I don't disagree, but I slightly disagree. So I don't believe in talent pipelines. That's the bit where I agree. I use talent pipelines for very senior hiring, so exec level hires or senior management hires. And I actually don't do it as a talent pipeline. I do it as a pre-assessment, because the influence that someone has at that level is just so great that once they join the business and if they fuck it up, it's absolutely brutal. You miss funding rounds, you slow the business down by 10%. It's just, it's so difficult to get it right. So I use it actually as a pre-assessment. I'm assessing someone 6 months before. I'm talking to them. I'm talking to probably, I know the roles that we need to hire kind of mid next year at a senior and exec level within the boundaries of kind of what's reasonable. And I'm probably speaking to maybe between 5 and 10 people for about 3 different very senior roles. But I'm not doing that as a selling technique. Well, I suppose there is always that, but I'm doing this because I want to assess the hell out of them. I want to go are you actually right for this business? And it just gives me so much longer to do it. And then I can go to my founders and go, hey, look, I've been speaking to the person for 6 months. This is strengths, this is weaknesses. I've already referenced them. Let's do it. That's where I disagree. But I don't do it as a pipeline. I do it as a pre-assessment.
Yeah, probably I should caveat or clarify that what I think you're describing there, that is an exec search function, right? If I go back to the agency partnerships, a contingency agency partner that we would be working with on evergreen or common hiring, then I think that's my positioning. Exec search firms absolutely have work within that network, and that's what you're paying for. That's the value up front. I agree.
Yeah.
Glenn, anything to add to that?
We've never had a talent pipeline of any sort of size. Haven't got the time to do it. To be blunt, haven't had visibility of a hiring plan that I trust 6 months out. So what countries are we going to be in? Everything comes at you thick and fast. The loosest association was probably quite similar to Andrew. You come across good people from networks, from LinkedIn, from applying into you, from cold applications, and you think they could be good for something in the future, and you engage with them, but nothing in terms of a formal talent pipeline. Just can't do it.
I've seen some businesses pipeline well, but they're more enterprise where their growth plans are a little bit clearer. And where they normally fall down is they leave the data just sitting there. They don't continue to engage with people. I mean, essentially, you just have historic data sitting on your ATS. So what I would say is if pipelining is something you want to try and do, try to consider how you consistently engage with that pipeline through automated content, because otherwise you're just starting the relationship scratch and it's basically having LinkedIn on your ATS, to what Glyn kind of mentioned there. So I'm going to read this one straight out because we've not got a lot of time, so I can't be smart. For a startup growing quickly, what was the most unexpected challenge you faced that you hadn't prepared for? That's the big one. How long have we got?
The easiest question for me is just underprepared managers. Like you haven't. I think when you've grown up in, like we've kind of grown up in talent. I was recruitment company, then VC, but I was doing a platform role there. Like you have this assumption that people know how to do shit, and they just don't. And they don't know how to source, they don't know how to assess, they don't know how to close. And my big, and at all levels, like it could be a junior manager, middle manager, senior manager, at all levels. If they've not done it before, they don't know how to do it. And my assumption was, you're a senior person, you can do this stuff. And I found out very, very quickly that just making cardinal sins that we would never make as people who've grown up in the industry. So my big learning, and I put a lot of time into this. I've always believed that your biggest leverage in people, talent, functions is your managers and your leaders. So just spend the time, train them on sourcing, train them on assessment, train them on closing, and constantly reiterate that. I've got to onboard it like any senior manager that comes in. I have a specific kind of TA onboarding that they have to go through so they know how to do it. All this sort of stuff. Spend the time with your managers. That's the key for me. They're your leverage everywhere.
Yeah, for me, it's how quickly your job and your company changes. Glyn mentioned doubling every year. You almost got a new company every 3 months. So you're constantly reimagining the culture and, like I say, re-educating managers and bringing them into, right, what does this next quarter look like in the next quarter? And that's the speed of that and the changes in direction on that, probably the most surprising thing to me.
I think probably similar thing, just how terrible some really smart people are at workforce planning. It's like somehow can create the most sophisticated marketing budget in the world, but ask them how many people they need to hire, and they're like, 700. And you're like, what? Are you insane? I feel like workforce planning is just so difficult for people to wrap their head around. And it's like, feels like it's fairly simple principles to me. So that's one thing that constantly surprises me, is just how wildly out of scope. Well, we have a very conservative engineering manager that thinks they need 3 people, and then another engineering manager who's just as senior that thinks they need 23 for the same scope of work. It's really interesting to me. And then the other thing I will say, which is more of a kind of people-y thing, I think recruitment teams tend to be better at this, is how frequently I work with people and talent teams that are just almost 100% input based. They have no output metrics. They have no output based projects. Everything is like, build a new benefits platform or ship a new thing. And I'm like, why? Why are we doing this? And they can't answer the question about why we're actually making something happen that's like resulting in some kind of output or change for the business. And like overcoming that with a team, like getting them to start thinking in terms of output metrics is really difficult. And it's taken sometimes, a quarter or 2 quarters of my consulting working with a VP of talent to actually get them to really be thinking effectively in outputs.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to it because output, we define that internally as impact. The one biggest cultural thing that I think we've done unbelievably well, it has its challenges, right? Because is getting absolutely everyone in the business to focus on impact. It is about the impact of you and what you do. And impact, by definition, is a measurable output. And we are obsessed with it. nothing gets done. Like if there's not a metric there, everybody goes mental. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. So I agree with Jess there on output. Like absolutely, if you can get to a point where you're just obsessed with impact, the impact of individuals, you'll go a long way in overcoming some challenges. But we have this saying, which is an unpopular saying when I say it out loud to people not in Napo, which is like, behaviors are what got you through the door. We expect that. You don't get points for it. We expect your behaviors. It's 100% impact.
I agree with everything. I think the only thing I would add, extension of Glenn's point, is that when everything's changing so quickly is about also having that change going to market. It's a point I made earlier, which is, you have to change your sell. It's not just about internal teams and processes. It's about fundamentally selling a different business. And if our TA function is first and foremost a sales function, then we need to redefine how we're selling the business. For us at Multiverse, first 200 people, it was so heavily social mission led. Everybody led with the reason they wanted to work for us, why they resonate with our mission, why it's important to them, their family background or personal background and how it ties in. Now at 900 people, everyone needs to have a good story around it, but it falls down the pecking order. You can join because of our leadership, because of our investment, because of your individual opportunities. There's a whole host of different things.
So we probably have time for one more question, and we're going to take a step back to pipelines. I think the audience were quite keen on that. So thinking of pipelines, community and development, internal development, do you think it's beneficial to have early careers programs, running events, attending events, as a different way of attracting talent to your company if you're a niche startup or scale up?
No. Well, the reason I say no is more of a principle I hold when you're building early stage companies, which is we don't hire many junior people. So we don't hire many people early on in their career. We're starting to now. And the reason is that we needed to grow so quickly. We needed to do things so quickly. We needed some people with experience. So I have a big principle. And actually, when I meet early stage startups and they're talking about hiring their kind of grad engineer, I'm like, that person is going to have zero impact for about a year. Because they can't, and it's no fault of their own, and they're brilliant. They need to be in an environment that will develop them and has the time to do that. You don't as an early stage company, and so I stay away from this, not because I don't think it's a good idea for larger companies. I just think it can be a real distraction for early stage. You get very little impact out of very early stage people, and you need high impact quickly. You've got 12 months to raise for a seed to Series A. You've got 18 from seed to Series B. Just don't have time. So that's my principle, and another unpopular one, I'm sure.
I mean, my answer is it depends. What kind of startup are you, right? Like, if you're building a Google DeepMind equivalent AI business, then, I mean, I would be wondering what your strategy is that you're bringing in. Maybe like PhDs, I'm not sure, but like if you're building an Amazon warehouse type logistics business, then maybe it's an awesome place to bring in junior talent and raise them through, right? It's like, who are you trying to be in the marketplace? And does it actually strategically make sense for you to build your organization in that way? I'm a really big fan of building like organizational design principles. So not just principles about how you operate together as a team, but genuinely how you build your org. Like, are you going to be a lean business? Are you going to have a high manager to team ratio? Are you going to have T-shaped team or very specific roles generally? And of course, those rules are there to be broken. You can have exceptions. But aligning on like what kind of company organizationally you're actually trying to build is really, really valuable. I would warn you strongly against coming to events and asking if you should do an early careers program and then taking everyone's advice. But they can be great if it's the right business. They're an awesome way to bring people in.
Yeah, really good advice, Glyn. I can see you're itching.
I guess rather than answering as a TA, I'll answer in terms of Multiverse and the business. Our product is apprenticeships. So I will always advocate for early careers. Not that apprenticeships are exclusively early careers, but it's obviously a cornerstone of our business. But your points are valid. That we intentionally do not work with businesses below a certain level, because part of our offering is how do we deliver return on investment through apprenticeships? How do we be able to say, actually, you wouldn't see it? And that needs infrastructure, and that needs support, and that works both ways. It's not successful for our apprentices if they go into a system that doesn't support them, because there just isn't the manpower there to do it, and it's not successful for the business.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think I should have added that. It would be negligent of me to do it. I have no infrastructure at all to develop these people. I've absolutely none. I wouldn't know where to start on developing an engineer, and my team wouldn't first, on developing an engineer that's a grad. It doesn't matter, and that's you just be negligent. You've got a duty of care to be able to develop these people. If they bring them in, you've got to think a lot about it. Now, I when I was in kind of recruitment in the early days of that we had a lot, and we had an incredible system to develop people, and it worked incredibly well. And there's people there that are 10 years on that joined as a grad, that are the senior managers of the business, doing incredibly well. So it can work. I just think if you're building a fast-growing early-stage technology company, it's unlikely you'll have the infrastructure.
Yeah, for us, we do have an early careers function as an extension of our talent team. Basically, long-term planning. It came down to a make versus buy decision. Basically, we need to create these people in the skill-short areas that we hire in engineering and tech. We know that in 2 years' time, we're still going to be hiring these people. So we'd rather develop these people internally. They come with company knowledge and they can plug into possibly some niche areas that we would struggle to hire, or we have to go to an external agency and it costs us a lot of money. And there was I think the ethical piece as well, that it's the right thing to do to start hiring early talent as well and developing them.
I'm going to have to jump in. We are out of time.